It's time once again for Talking Bible with the Brandons, the only podcast that proves a Tennessee fan and an Alabama fan can get along. Here's your host, Pastors Brandon Pugh and Brandon Carter.
Good morning, Bethel. And here we find ourselves once again on another Talking Bible with the Brandons. What are we counting here?
Talking TBWB.
What are you trying to
Get an acronym. Talking Bible with the Brandons. Talking TBWTB with the TBWDB.
Yeah, man. Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we can make something out of
I don't
that.
know in what way we can find use out of that.
I don't know. You didn't hit the button over there to tell us how long we're doing this.
Oh, you're right. Let me do that. Good call. So we'll just say whatever.
We've been a minute.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, speaking of something, I just want to know, did you do a memory verse this week?
I did not.
Mm.
I did not, but that's because I was spending most of my time just studying extra scripture.
No, you were spending most of your time probably buying fireworks or something.
That's important too, you know. But I did not. Did you do your memory verse for this?
Well, I did Daniel 4:35.
You took the easy one.
I did.
Yeah, because I looked at them and I thought, well, Ezekiel
Yeah.
36, 26 through 27 is definitely not happening. Tell
I
us.
just like Daniel 4:35, and here's why.
Okay.
It is the theme, pretty much the theme of the whole book. You know?
Oh, yeah.
All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the hosts of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and no one can stay his hand or say, "What have you done?"
Hey, look at you, man. You got it all there.
And I did the previous one there, which I don't have memorized, is his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. So we'll get into this because
That's tomorrow.
It's kind of getting to the heart, though, of what the book of Daniel is about.
Mm-hmm. So, and you maybe kind of alluded to it there, just with the that verse there that you cited. But yeah, I mean, I think all this week we've been talking about what it's like to be part of God's people in exile, surrounded in a culture and a place that is pagan in many ways here.
Yep.
So. Daniel is just another example of that. Love the book here. Love the man Daniel himself. He's a man of conviction, and he's a young man whenever he's taken into captivity.
Yes.
And I think someone like Daniel, whenever he's probably like a teenager, something like that. Whenever he's taken into captivity and being immersed in a world like this, a lot of times we get so worried and so caught up with our young people, and I think rightfully so, that they'll be influenced by the culture around them. And here we see Daniel is, he's an outlier here. You know, he stands in stark contrast to those who go into Babylon and really conform to that culture. But his identity is first and foremost as a child of God, and
That's right.
so that's what we really see with Daniel, and just him kind of living that out in the midst of Babylon.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, the great thing about Daniel is that he would not compromise. So I had verse 8 as my theme verse, or the verse that I thought about spoke to me, because Daniel and the other three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are taken into exile, into Babylon, and they're kind of brought into the king's palace because they're very skilled, they're very good, wise young boys, and the king has them on a certain diet or a certain way of living according to their ways.
That's
and
right.
The Bible says in verse 8 that Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. Now that seems like such a small thing, right? The diet, what you eat. But for them, prior to the new covenant, prior to Jesus being here and declaring all foods clean, it was a wicked thing for them to eat certain foods that they considered to be unclean. And so for Daniel's purposes, he doesn't want to eat something that would displease God. He doesn't want to do anything that would displease God. So I love the statement. Daniel resolved. He resolved. So it's like you got to have resolve before the situation comes, before you're in the middle of the heat. When you're in the battle, if you don't have the resolve when you're in the thick of it, it's too late almost at that point, you know?
Yeah, and if you look at the verses that really precede this, there's a progression of sorts. So we see Daniel, his friends as well, taken into exile. And a lot of times what the world will do, what Satan will do, is he'll try to work in a particular order to really tear you away from God and what it is that he wants you to do. And like you said, you need to be determined beforehand to have that resolve.
No compromise.
To not be shaken there. And so if we look in verse 3, it says, the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and the nobility. So first, we see them bringing the people of Israel. So first we see an isolation. We're going to pull you away from the people of God.
Yeah.
And then we see an indoctrination. It says right there in verse 4, youths. So this is what he wanted: youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful all wisdom, endowed with knowledge and understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. So we see first we have to isolate you, then we have to indoctrinate you. Then you see an assimilation, kind of, we're going to assign you this certain diet. You're going to be like us, okay? You're going to eat what we eat. You're going to drink what we drink. And then there's
isolation, indoctrination,
assimilation, and then confusion.
Oh,
yeah, I know. Yeah,
you had a good sermon outline going there, and you blew it.
I know. But in verse 6,
consternation.
Oh yes, I love it. So yes, consternation. The final step there. I thought you were lifting up.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go, Spurgeon. But yeah, so we see right there in verse 6, here's what the result of all of that is there. It says, among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. So whenever you are isolated from the people of God and you are indoctrinated and assimilated into the way of the world, there's an identity change. And you know, these names right here, they're not by accident. I had them written down in my notes here that Daniel means Elohim is my judge. And I mean, that's just not a random name. Like, that would have been an identity for Daniel. For the others, Yahweh is gracious. Who is like Elohim? Yahweh helps. These were what their Hebrew names meant here.
Right.
And so what we see here is, the people of God right here being kind of torn away from what it is that they were brought up and raised in, and their identities are being changed. But yet right there, like you said in verse 8, Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself. And that's really kind of what we see throughout the entirety of the rest of the book.
Yeah.
It's just that and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So.
Yeah, and the only way you do that, the only way you can have that kind of resolve and this idea of not compromising is to know ultimately who's in control.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Nebuchadnezzar or is it the Lord?
Mm-hmm.
Is it King Jesus or is it, the political party of the day, whoever the president is, or whoever's on the Supreme Court, or whoever's
That's a good point.
Your basketball coach, or whoever is controlling the media, or is Hollywood, your friends, those putting peer pressure on you, a person. I mean, the list is endless.
Right, yeah.
Who's in control?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question. And whoever you believe's in control is the one that you're going to fear and submit yourself under. And these guys, I mean, they lived wisely. They weren't disrespectful to the Babylonians or to the king. But when it came down to a choice between, like, we're either going to obey God or we're going to obey man, they're like, okay, we got to obey God. This is what we do.
Yeah.
And who's your king? That's kind of the question right here. So,
Yeah. Well, let's move on to chapter 2 here really quick. So Nebuchadnezzar has a very disturbing dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he calls together all the Chaldeans and the wise men, the sorcerers, and all those folks. And he says to them, hey, not only do I want you to interpret my dream, but I want you to tell me what my dream was. So that's tough, right?
Yeah.
So, all of his wise men, they're upset and they think that,
And rightfully so.
right, yeah. And what they say in verse 11 is true. It says, the thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh.
Yep.
Cue Daniel. Okay.
Exactly.
Cue Daniel. So Daniel was considered one of the king's wise men. He would have been executed as well with everyone here.
Mm-hmm.
If the king was not able to have his dream not only revealed but interpreted. So Daniel's got a buddy here, I guess, with the king's guard, and he explains to him the situation. And I love what Daniel's reaction is here. So, and this was what I highlighted for our reading here. So Daniel, he doesn't panic whenever he's about to be executed, but we see quite the opposites here. So it says in verse 17, then Daniel, after he found out, what King Nebuchadnezzar's order was, then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. So first, he goes to his fellow brothers, okay? So this is like Daniel's going to church, right? Okay? Yeah. So he's perplexed by this, so he goes to them, he seeks counsel, maybe he seeks comfort, but this is what the fellowship of Christians does, really. I mean, we go to one another whenever we have issues or things like that. And then it says, then he told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. So basically pray to God, right? We need to seek mercy from him so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then, right here in verse 19, it says, then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. So the idea there is
dream, I guess.
Right. So they just sought mercy from God. They prayed to God, and then Daniel just goes to sleep.
Yeah.
He's like, I've done all I can do on my part here.
Right.
This is in God's hands. In the words of the Chaldeans here, this is in the hands of the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh.
Yeah.
And we see right there what happens. It says that God granted him the vision in the night, and then Daniel blessed the God of heaven.
Yeah.
And then we see his prayer right there, or his prayer blessing, thanksgiving there to God. So, once again, we kind of see a stark contrast to the people of the world and the people of God and how they handle issues there. So.
Right. So seeking the Lord, resting, he's able to sleep, he's able to rest in what God, and God miraculously and supernaturally intervenes. And I think, again, proving in many ways the theme of the book of Daniel, that God is the king. He is the true king, not the king of Babylon or anybody else. And he's showing right here, here's a king who goes to sleep, has trouble, can't interpret the dream, he's worried. And the king of the universe steps in to say, this is really what your dream is about. And basically, it's just a way of him. And, of course, the dream itself is
what about that dream, Brandon?
It's like, hey, Nebuchadnezzar, you're not going to reign forever.
Right.
There's a kingdom coming that's bigger than your kingdom. And, of course, Daniel has the boldness to tell him that and say, this is what the Lord said.
Yeah.
Again, just the idea of no compromise. God is with him, and Daniel has rock solid faith, and so he doesn't back down at all.
Oh yeah. Man, can we just talk about the dream super quick, man?
Because
if you guys didn't do the reading here, you may be wondering, well, what's the big deal about this dream? So in Nebuchadnezzar's dream here, he envisions this giant statue, and the giant statue is the statue of a man. It has a head of gold. It has a chest of silver. Is it an abdomen, right, or a torso of bronze, and then legs of iron, and then it has feet that are that's iron, but there's also clay mixed in with it. So. pretty wide consensus on these being kind of civilizations, coming empires, kingdoms of the world here. So Babylon is the head, and Daniel says that King Nebuchadnezzar there. And then the silver is a lot of times associated with the Medes, the Persians there, Cyrus, and then you have the bronze, which are the Greeks. Oftentimes are associated with that during the Bronze Age, and then iron, the Roman Empire. And so here's where the guesswork comes in too. A lot of people wonder, well, what happens with the statue is there's a, I forgot how it goes. So basically there's like a small little piece, like a rock that just comes down and just shatters the whole thing, and the rock basically turns into a mountain, and that's to symbolize the kingdom of God.
Right. Yeah.
And how that will reign forever, and how it's greater and better than any other human kingdom, and how really human kingdoms kind of worsen, how they kind of digress over a period of time. But a lot of people, they try to postulate, what is this last, this kingdom, the feet? What does that symbolize of the iron mixed in with the clay? Is that a reunification of the Roman Empire here, or what would you? Where are you at with all that, Brandon? In 1 minute.
I have no idea.
Okay, all right, yeah.
I have
European
no idea.
Union, maybe.
No,
maybe the G7.
No,
a lot of different schools of thought out there, man.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah,
I'm sure this has been China before, and it's probably been the Soviet Union, or America, or the Roman Catholic Church. I'm sure there's all kinds of interpretations for this. And the answer for me is, I don't know. I know that God's kingdom is going to last forever. And He's going to win.
Do you know what the last kingdom is?
That's right. I know who's coming out on top.
That's right. You know how the movie ends.
That's right. That's right.
Well, all right, guys. Well, it's always fun just to talk a little Bible here, and think things through there.
Yeah.
And but if you like being in the book of Daniel, then guess what? We're gonna be right back in there tomorrow, and we're gonna see more dreams from King Nebuchadnezzar, more God proving that he's ultimately the one that's sovereign and in control, and more of Daniel, just refusing to bow the knee. So there you go. Lesson of the day: dare to be Daniel, right?
Oh, yes.
Right, Brandon. Dare to be Daniel.
Dare to be a Daniel.
Yes.
That's your sermon title.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I think that's all we've got for today. I've got to make sure I get our exit music going here.
Make sure.
And and we'll see y'all tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Bible with the Brandons. Be sure to like our page on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search for Bethel Baptist RC. You can also get updates at our website at www.bethelnow.net. Thanks again for listening.